If this doesn't make you feel like autumn, I don't know what will. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint, curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. Hello, lovely people. It's Kaylin. I'm here. It's fall. I'm in a sweater. I've got my tea. It's crisp. It's cool outside. The leaves are just changing colors. And I want to tell you a bit about the books that I love to read in fall, as well as a couple of books that I'm looking forward to reading this fall. Autumn is upon us. We just had our first day of autumn last week, and I can already feel on the East Coast the crisp mornings, the desire to go apple picking, the leaves starting to change their colors. And so I think it's the perfect season to read. You can get cozy, watch the rain fall, curl up with a good book. So I wanted to share some of my favorite fall reads with you today. There's something about fall that just makes me feel like reaching for either the classics or reaching for books I haven't read since I was a kid. So a book I recently just finished last night when I should have been sleeping was Sabriel from the Old Kingdom trilogy or series by Garth Nix. And this is a book that I read as a child and loved, and I haven't read for years. It's a dark, sort of, not spooky, but slightly sinister YA fantasy. I don't even know if it can be called YA. It was out before YA was a thing. The first book came out in the 90s, and it is that sort of young fantasy, children's fantasy story about a necromancer and her father's quest to save this old kingdom from the sinister forces of the dead and the evil. So it was a great book. I'm going to continue on in reading rereading the series, but that is one of the books I've been rereading recently. I have also been rereading the Libba Bray Great and Terrible Beauty series, which I loved as a child. I was obsessed with these books and terrified by them in equal measure. And I actually have another Libba Bray on here. A book that I'm going to be reading this fall is The Diviners. I haven't actually read this one, but Libba Bray was a favorite author growing up. So I'm excited to jump from the rereads of Great and Terrible Beauty into The Diviners. Something dark and evil has awakened. It sounds perfect for spooky, cozy fall reading. Another series that I reach for often in the fall is Anne of Green Gables. I loved Anne of Green Gables series. Obviously, growing up with red hair, I felt like I was Anne. Pardon the honking. I live in a major city now. And this cover, hello, gorgeous. Her quote about Octobers, I just think is a perfect fall quote. She's just so descriptive of the beautiful nature on Prince Edward Island. She's so full of life and spunky. This is one of my favorite books for fall. And I also love the series, Anne with an E, if you haven't watched it. This time of year is also perfect to pull out your Shirley Jacksons. So last year I read The Haunting of Hill House and absolutely adored it. This is also another gorgeous cover I have. Just really stunning Penguin Random House cover this is the Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition of The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And this year I'm going to be reading We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Again, another one of these gorgeous covers.
I think I know how to say penguin. I'll say penguins.
From the Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition. But I love women writing about creepy houses. Sort of gothic literature has been a favorite of mine in this time of year. I loved reading Rebecca. Rebecca was a book I read at the very beginning of 2021 and absolutely adored it. And then promptly after read The Haunting of Hill House, and then also Jane Eyre. So something about women, madness, and spooky houses just really speaks to me. So I'm really looking forward to reading We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Speaking of women and spooky houses, last year I also read Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and this book was so creepy, so well written. The mushroom situation is fungus situation is so wild. The world building, the descriptions, you feel this house, this damp, awful house in your soul. And you really, besides the fact that the cover is gorgeous, the writing is as well. Highly recommend it. Another series I finished last year was The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I read the whole series, Angel's Gate, Prisoner of Heaven, Labyrinth of the Spirits. And these books are sort of a more modern day take on the Gothic genre. It takes place in Spain, in Barcelona in the 1940s. It is also a great book for those who love books. It's like a mystery surrounding an author and a bookstore and a city of books, almost a cathedral of books. I really enjoyed the prose, the pacing, the characters, and just slipping into this world. Autumn is also a time I love to read mysteries. I really enjoy mysteries, whether they're a more modern, like The Thursday Murder Club is a book I plan on reading this fall. Do I have that up here? No, it's in the other room. But I also love the classics. So this time of year is a great time of year to read Sherlock Holmes. This is just the Barnes & Noble edition, and I, like literally everything, am obsessed with it. I would recommend any of his main stories, The Hound of the Baskervilles, The Sign of the Four, A Study in Scarlet. I mean, all of these, I would say, are worth reading. If you're not feeling Sherlock Holmes, and Agatha Christie is also always a very fun alternative. I think I have Death on the Nile out from the library that I plan on reading. Last year I read the classic Murder on the Orient Express, but she's another one who is a very fun classic mystery. She's a queen of the genre. If you are thinking you want some poetry or short stories, Edgar Allan Poe is fantastic for this time of year. One of my favorites is The Raven. Then this ebony bird beguiling my said fancy into smiling by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the Raven, nevermore. A classic. If you'd prefer to go the play route classic-wise, I think autumn is a great time to read some Macbeth, some Shakespeare. This is such a great time of year to bring in the spot and just the beautiful imagery of that play. Macbeth is one of my favorite Shakespeare plays, and I just think that that is perfect for autumn. Spooky, another spooky sort of vibe. Since I've already read Macbeth, although I think I would love to reread it, I also, in the theme of Shakespeare, will be reading Hamnet this fall, which follows the family of Shakespeare, the kids and wife of Shakespeare. And I think it's gotten some really great reviews, although I also think it's quite sad, maybe a little depressing. So we'll see how that goes. The last set of books I think that would be great to read, one is a classic from what I read in high school or middle school, maybe middle school, by Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes. I think it is a perfect novel for spooky season, highly recommend. And also, in a slightly different genre, I loved Susanna Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which is a big chunky book I don't have with me. And then also I read Piranesi this year, which I think won the Women's Prize for fiction and is just phenomenal. I can't even describe it. I don't think I've ever read anything like it. It is much shorter than Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and it is just so unique. It draws a lot of symbolism and inspiration from the Chronicles of Narnia, Magician's Nephew. So read that book first if you'd like a little refresher. But then I would just say go into this. It's an unreliable narrator. It's a story where as you're reading it, you're trying to determine, is the main character and the narrator going mad? Is he losing his mind? Or is there a magic system at play? You're trying to figure out who you can trust. What is reality? It's a phenomenal read. Those are the books I've enjoyed reading in the past and plan on reading in the future. Another quick shout out goes to the Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom duology. I loved them. I read them this past year and inhaled them, and I'm absolutely obsessed with them. So A+ goes to that. Let's talk shows. A couple of shows I think are great for this time of year would be Sex Education is one of my favorite shows of all time. The third season just came out and it follows high schoolers. So you've got that sort of school setting, academic setting, which I find excellent for fall. And Otis, the main character's mother, is a sex therapist and sex educator, and he has internalized a lot of the knowledge that she has, been teaching over the years. And so he goes to high school and there's just a lot of misinformation being passed around, and he starts like a sex clinic basically in the abandoned bathrooms in the back of his high school, he and a friend, and he gives advice, and he actually gives very thoughtful, very good advice for a teenage boy. And it's really fun to see this sort of educational type of advice be given in this very from the form of a 15-year-old boy who doesn't even really understand himself. The cast of characters is phenomenal. I think it does a lot of storylines justice. It has great queer representation. I think it's a fairly diverse show. It's well acted, it's well written. There is obviously some sex is a conversation about, the show has sex in it. Called Sex Education. So if that's not something that you're interested in, pass on that. But otherwise, I think it's phenomenal television, and you can find that on Netflix. A show I love to watch this time of year is Anne with an E. So that is a television portrayal of the Anne of Green Gables storyline. They do change it slightly, and I think they just bring the essence of the story and update it to include more storylines maybe than would have been included by Ellen Montgomery. So there's some Indigenous representation. They change some of the women, the female characters, to have different, stronger storylines, and also bring in some representation of Black Canadians in that time, which is very cool. So again, the beautifully filmed, the most beautiful shots of Prince Edward Island in Canada. Gorgeous and very autumnal. And then the woman, Amy Beth McNulty, I guess she was a child when she was filming it, who plays Anne, is a picture perfect, absolutely perfect actress for the role. She embodies Anne with her whole heart, and it made me fall in love with the book series and just the whole universe over and over again. So definitely recommend that. In terms of mystery shows for fall, obviously Sherlock is a phenomenal TV show about Sherlock Holmes, but I also really like Veronica Mars, which is an older series that has Kristen Bell acting as the main character, Veronica Mars. It's sort of an hard-boiled detective meets high school in California show. It's very, very good. It has such a fierce, strong character as at the center of it. The relationship between Veronica and her father, who is a PI, a private detective, is just phenomenal. So highly recommend that if you're thinking of detective television. Another sort of detective-y series that I love is Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. It's an Australian series, and it takes place in the 1920s. I think when shows are cast really well, I love them. The main character, Miss Fisher, is a wealthy woman detective in the 1920s who is she walks her own path, she does her own thing, and her counterpart, Jack, is a detective with the actual police force in Melbourne, Australia, and it is just a joy to watch. The costuming, the storytelling, the characters, the main actors, everyone, go watch it. If you have BritBox or any sort, I think you can get it on Amazon Prime. It is definitely worth watching. Movies that I love to watch during this time. I think this is a great time to watch any Studio Ghibli films. I love especially Kiki's Delivery Service, My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away. All of these have cozy vibes that I feel like are great for fall. I also love the film Chocolat. I think that has, for me, some fall feelings. It's like subtly witchy. And you've got a small town in France. A single mother opens a chocolate factory. I just think it's a lovely film. And one of my favorites from growing up. I also feel like The Illusionist is a film I used to watch when I was younger that is great for this time of year. It's a historical magician story and just is beautifully done. I haven't watched it in years, but it's making me want to watch it. I feel like also just the dark, moody ambiance of that film is very autumnal. This is also when I love to break out Keeping Mum, which is one of my favorite British movies of all time. Maggie Smith is in it. Patrick Swayze is in it. Maggie Smith is an old lady who, I don't even know how to describe this besides she's an old lady who kills people, but it's not scary. It's very sweet. Mr. Bean is in it. Rowan Atkinson is in it. Just phenomenal British actors are in it. It's somehow wholesome, even though there's murder, and just follows a family, a very kooky family who are very endearing and ultimately a very heartwarming story. I also love to break out my 6-hour version of Pride and Prejudice in the fall. So there's something about Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet that just screams autumn to me. But you could also watch maybe Northanger Abbey for a little bit of a more autumnal Austen, or if you don't have 6 hours, I suppose you can watch the 2005 Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice, but in my opinion, it is the inferior of the two. I love watching the Harry Potter series around fall, especially The Prisoner of Azkaban. I just think that that film is spooky and wonderful in all the right ways. And my favorite Halloween movie of all time is The Corpse Bride. I hope this gave you some ideas of things to watch and read, and I hope you have a cozy and spooky fall season. I can't make any promises that I'll be making these videos all the time, but I would like to start making them again more frequently. So if you would like to stick around, feel free to subscribe. And I also think I'm starting a TikTok to do sometimes it's just a lot of effort to do a full video. So for shorter takes on books I'm reading and things I am doing, you can also find me, Kaylin May, over there. So I hope all is well, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.